The Wyoming wind had teeth in November. Maggie Crawford pulled her worn shawl tighter around her shoulders as she made her way across the frozen ground toward the chicken coop. 6 months pregnant and alone on a failing homestead. This wasn't the life she'd imagined when she'd married Thomas 2 years ago. But Thomas was gone now, thrown from a spooked horse and buried under the cottonwood tree behind the house. And Maggie was left with 40 acres of stubborn land, 3 chickens, 1 aging cow, and a baby coming in the spring. She was checking the fence line near the creek when she heard it, a low, pained groan that made her freeze mid-step. Her first instinct was to run back to the house. A woman alone couldn't be too careful. But the sound came again, weaker this time, and something in Maggie's chest pulled tight. She found him sprawled in the dry creek bed, half hidden by sagebrush. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, his face pale beneath several days' worth of dark stubble. Blood had soaked through his shirt on the left side, and his breathing came shallow and labored. "Sir." Maggie knelt beside him, her heart hammering. "Can you hear me?" His eyes opened, startling blue against his weathered face. "Water," he rasped. Maggie didn't have water with her, but she couldn't leave him here to die. "I'm going to help you up. My house isn't far." "Too heavy," he managed. "Leave me." "Absolutely not." Maggie positioned herself under his right arm, on 3. 1, 2, 3. It took everything she had, but somehow they made it to their feet. The man was easily 6 feet tall and solid muscle, but desperation gave Maggie strength she didn't know she possessed. Step by agonizing step, they made their way across the field. By the time they reached the house, both were gasping. Maggie kicked open the door and helped him to the narrow bed in the corner. Her bed, the only one in the one-room cabin. "I need to see the wound," she said, already reaching for the buttons of his shirt. He caught her wrist weakly. "Not proper. I'm a widow, sir, and you're dying." "Propriety can wait." She brushed his hand aside and opened his shirt. The wound was deep, a gash across his ribs that looked like it had come from a knife or perhaps barbed wire. It needed stitching, and it needed it now. Maggie had helped birth calves and mended Thomas when he'd cut himself, but this was different. Her hands shook as she threaded the needle, but she forced them steady. The man, she didn't even know his name, gritted his teeth and bore it in silence. When she finished, she cleaned the wound with whiskey and wrapped it with strips torn from one of her few remaining good sheets. Only then did she allow herself to sink into the chair beside the bed. "Thank you," he whispered, his eyes already closing. "Name's Cole." "Maggie," she replied. "Rest now." Cole slept for nearly 2 days straight. Maggie checked on him regularly, changing his bandages and spooning broth into his mouth when he was conscious enough to swallow. She should have been afraid. A strange man in her house, no neighbors for miles. But something about him felt safe. On the 3rd morning, she woke to find him sitting up, his color much improved. "You should be lying down," she scolded, hurrying over. "Been lying down for 3 days. His voice was stronger now, with a hint of gravel that suggested he wasn't used to being told what to do. "Where's your husband?" "Dead. 6 months now." Cole's expression softened. "I'm sorry. And you're—" His gaze dropped to her belly. "Due in March." Maggie busied herself at the stove, uncomfortable with his scrutiny. "What happened to you?" "Ambush. 3 men jumped me on the road from Cheyenne. Wanted my horse and whatever money I was carrying." He touched his side gingerly. "Got the horse. Didn't get much else. You're lucky to be alive. Lucky you found me." He watched her move around the small cabin. "This your place?" "Mine and my late husband's. 40 acres. Not much, but it's ours. Mine." The correction still felt strange on her tongue. "You planning to stay? Work it yourself?" Maggie lifted her chin. "I don't have anywhere else to go. And I won't lose what Thomas and I built together." Something flickered in Cole's eyes. Respect, maybe. That's a hard life for a woman alone, especially with a baby coming. "I'm aware." She set a bowl of porridge in front of him. "Eat. You need your strength if you're going to heal." Over the next week, Cole grew stronger. He insisted on helping around the cabin despite Maggie's protests, chopping wood and repairing the sagging porch steps. He was quiet, speaking only when necessary. but his presence filled the small space in a way that was both comforting and unsettling. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Maggie finally asked the question that had been nagging at her. "Where are you from, Cole? You never said." He was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, all over. "I own some land around here." "A ranch?" Something like that. There was a weight to his words that suggested more, but Maggie didn't press. Everyone had secrets in Wyoming. 2 weeks after Maggie found Cole, a group of riders appeared on the horizon. She was hanging laundry when she spotted them. 5 men on horseback, moving fast across the plains. Fear spiked through her. Cole was in the barn, and she was alone and vulnerable. She dropped the sheet she'd been hanging and ran for the house, where Thomas's old rifle hung above the door. But before she could reach it, Cole emerged from the barn. He stood in the yard, calm and still, as the riders approached. The lead rider pulled up short, his weathered face breaking into a grin. "Boss, we've been searching for you for 2 weeks. Thought you were dead." "Boss?" Maggie stood frozen in the doorway as the men dismounted, all talking at once. Cole raised a hand for silence, and they obeyed immediately. "I'm fine, thanks to Mrs. Crawford here." He gestured toward Maggie. "She saved my life." The men turned to look at her with a mixture of curiosity and respect. The lead rider, a grizzled man with silver hair, tipped his hat. "Ma'am, name's Dutch. I'm Mr. Hartley's foreman." "Hartley?" Maggie looked at Cole. "Cole Hartley," he said quietly. "I should have told you sooner." The name hit her like a physical blow. Everyone in Wyoming knew the Hartley name. Cole Hartley owned the largest cattle empire in the state, thousands of acres, dozens of ranches, more wealth than Maggie could imagine. And she'd been feeding him porridge and making him sleep in her dead husband's nightshirt. "You lied to me," she said, her voice tight. "I never lied. I just didn't tell you everything." Cole took a step toward her, but she backed away. "You let me think you were just some cowboy." "Why?" "Because that's what I wanted to be, just for a little while." His blue eyes held hers. "When you found me, I was nobody, just a man who needed help, and you gave it without asking what I could do for you in return. Do you know how rare that is?" Maggie's anger wavered, but she held firm. "You should go. Your men are here now. You don't need me anymore." "Maggie, thank you for your help with the chores, Mr. Hartley. I hope you heal well." She turned and walked into the house, closing the door firmly behind her. Through the window, she watched Cole speak with his men. Then, to her surprise, he sent them away, all except Dutch, who rode off toward town. Cole walked to the door and knocked. "Maggie, please. Let me explain." "There's nothing to explain. You're healed. You can leave." "I don't want to leave." Those 5 words, spoken so simply, made her heart stutter. She pressed her forehead against the door. "Why not?" "Because for the first time in 10 years, I've felt like a person instead of a name. Because you're the strongest woman I've ever met. Because—" he paused. "Because I want to help you keep this place." Maggie opened the door. "I don't need your charity. It's not charity. It's partnership." Cole met her gaze steadily. "You saved my life. Let me help you save your home." Against her better judgment, Maggie agreed. Cole stayed, and true to his word, he worked. Not as the wealthy rancher he was, but as a partner. He repaired the barn roof, fixed the well pump, and taught Maggie how to manage the small herd of cattle he had Dutch bring from one of his ranches. "They're yours," he said when Maggie protested. "Consider it payment for room and board. 20 head of cattle is a bit more than room and board. Then, consider it a gift." His eyes crinkled at the corners. "I can afford it." As winter deepened, the cabin became a haven. Cole slept in the barn, insisting Maggie keep the bed, and they fell into an easy routine. Mornings were for chores, afternoons for repairs and planning, evenings for sitting by the fire and talking. Maggie learned that Cole had inherited his empire at 21 when his father died, that he'd spent the last decade building it larger while losing himself in the process. "I forgot why I was doing it," he admitted one night. "Forgot what it was all for." "And now?" Maggie asked, her hands resting on her belly where the baby kicked. Now I remember. It's for this, for building something that matters, for family. The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. As Christmas approached, Cole rode to town and returned with supplies, fabric for baby clothes, food, for a proper holiday meal, and a carved wooden cradle that made Maggie's eyes sting with tears. "You didn't have to do this," she whispered. "I wanted to." He set the cradle beside the bed. Every baby deserves a proper place to sleep. On Christmas Eve, as snow fell softly outside, they sat together by the fire. Maggie had made a simple dinner, and Cole had surprised her with a small gift, a music box that played a gentle lullaby. "It was my mother's," he said. "I want you to have it." "Cole, I can't." "Please." He closed her fingers around it. "You've given me more than you know, Maggie. You've given me a reason to be more than just a name on a deed." Maggie looked up at him, at this man who had come into her life as a stranger and become something she was afraid to name. "What are we doing here, Cole?" "I don't know," he admitted. "But I know I don't want it to end." March came with the promise of spring. Maggie's time was near, and Cole refused to leave her side. He'd brought in a doctor from Cheyenne who stayed in town, ready to come at a moment's notice. The labor started on a clear morning. Cole rode for the doctor while Dutch's wife, Mary, stayed with Maggie. By the time Cole returned with Dr. Morrison, Maggie was in the thick of it. Cole paced outside like a caged animal until Mary finally took pity on him and let him in. He sat beside Maggie, letting her grip his hand hard enough to bruise, murmuring encouragement. When the baby finally came, a healthy girl with a powerful set of lungs, Cole was the first to hold her after Maggie. "She's perfect," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "What will you name her?" "Hope," Maggie said without hesitation. "Her name is Hope." As Cole placed the baby in her arms, Maggie saw her future clearly for the first time since Thomas died. It wasn't the future she'd planned, but it was real and solid and full of possibility. "Stay," she said, looking up at Cole. "Not as a guest or a helper. Stay as family." Cole's eyes shone. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." Maggie smiled. "We're building something here, aren't we? Something that matters." "Yes," Cole said, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "We are." The Crawford-Hartley Ranch, as it was now known, had grown. The cabin had been expanded, the herd had multiplied, and Maggie had learned to manage the business side of ranching with Cole's patient teaching. Hope was walking now, toddling after Cole as he worked, her laughter ringing across the plains. And Maggie, standing on the porch of their home, felt a contentment she'd never thought possible. Cole came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" "About how strange life is. A year ago, I found a dying cowboy in a creek bed. Now look at us. Best day of my life. That day you found me," Cole said. "Well, second best. What's the first?" "The day you asked me to stay." He turned her to face him. "The day we became a family." Maggie kissed him, tasting home and hope and the promise of all the tomorrows they'd build together on this wild Wyoming land.